In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially ended the American Revolution and granted the 13 former British colonies in North America their independence from British rule. So what now? What are they going to do next? Well, let's look at some facts from before the war and during the war to help us understand what's about to happen. So 1, the 13 former colonies, now states, were fiercely independent. There was no loyalty to this idea of the United States of America. People were mostly loyal to their own states or their own region. It wasn't even really until the war that they had any sense of unity amongst themselves. For example, the colonies rejected Benjamin Franklin's Albany Plan of Union in 1754. This was a plan he created to try and unite the colonies towards the common interest of protecting themselves against the French and Indian threat during the French and Indian War. You'd think that they'd be able to gather around this common goal, but they still didn't. And finally, the former colonies were suspicious of a strong central government. They had just finished off throwing the shackles of the British government, and they didn't want it replaced with another government who would just do the same kinds of things and impose rules and laws that would limit the freedom of the newly independent states. So looking at these facts, it's a wonder, why did these 13 states decide to stick together? Wouldn't it have made more sense for them to just become 13 independent states? I mean, after all, it was just the American Revolution that caused them to unite together, right? Just to survive the war. Well, as they experienced the war, they realized that they actually needed one another, and it made more sense to stick together even after the war. During the war, they had a really difficult time managing the war effort. The Continental Congress, which was the temporary government of the 13 states at that time, had a really difficult time just trying to get all the states to contribute money, soldiers, resources to the war effort. They asked for them, but the states didn't necessarily comply, and no one could make them. Second, the states strongly felt the absence of British rule. When the British government was there, they had systems and services in place that really helped run daily life. For example, managing roads, having a uniform currency, and managing trade between the colonies, and even international trade. So when that was suddenly pulled away from the 13 colonies, now states, life became really hard. So while the American Revolution united the 13 states, it's actually what kept them together as well after. They needed to stay together to create a strong central government to serve and do the following. 1, for defense and security. The states recognized the need to protect themselves and that they needed to stick together under one strong central government to provide protection against foreign invasion, like the French or the British, and against Native American attacks. The colonies also recognized that they needed a national government to regulate interstate commerce and just kind of manage the trade between the different states. They needed a central government to make sure that the trade between the states was fair and efficient, and that if there were any disputes, it would be solved fairly and efficiently. The war couldn't have been won without diplomacy and help from France. This made the states realize that they really needed to come under a central government who would be able to work on building relationships with foreign countries and work on agreements regarding military and economic matters. The states also realized that they needed a central government to work out any disagreements they might have with each other, whether it's barrier and again trade disputes or any legal disputes. And finally, it would have to be a central government that would upkeep all the roads and services that go between the different states. These are some of the most important services that the new states missed when the British government left. So on June 11th, 1776, while the American Revolution was still being fought, the Continental Congress went ahead and put a committee together to write the Articles of Confederation. This would be the document that creates the first national government of the new United States. The Articles of Confederation took about a month to write, but it wasn't ratified until 1781. And these were its main points. 1, it created a firm league of friendship between the 13 states, which made them into a confederation under one central government. 2, even though they were one confederation now, each state still maintained its sovereignty, meaning it still maintained its power to govern itself. And each state had one vote in Congress, which is that central government under the Confederation. Each state only had one vote in Congress, regardless of how many people they had. The Confederation government, this new federal government, had very limited powers. It could declare war, conduct foreign affairs, and regulate money, but it could not tax its citizens directly. It could only request for money, but the states weren't obligated to give any. And it also didn't have the power to enforce any of its laws. Each state was responsible for enforcing the central government's laws in their own states. So if a state decided not to enforce a law that the Confederation government passed, they didn't have to follow it. Number 6, amendments to the Articles of Confederation had to be passed through a unanimous vote. That means it was really hard to change this document. 7, so again, the government, the central government, would be comprised by just one group of people. And that one group of people was made up of representatives from each state, just one, right? Each state only had one vote, regardless of how many people they had in their state. And these delegates were chosen and paid by the state governments. Though, number 8, the Confederation could settle disputes between states and negotiate treaties with other governments. So there's that. So as you can see, the Articles of Confederation had major flaws. So then it's not a surprise that under the Articles of Confederation, we encounter several problems. First, economic. So each state had the power to regulate their own trade, and as a result, trade between the states was really difficult. All the states had different currencies, and this led to a lot of confusion. For example, in 1781, Massachusetts just stopped printing money. They're like, nope, there's too much inflation. All these other states are printing so much money. We're just going to stop. And this led to a lot of problems. Number 3, again, the Confederation government didn't have the ability to enforce laws because it didn't have a military. So, for example, part of the Treaty of Paris, the agreement, was that the British would leave. Well, when they refused to leave or just kind of took their time, right? Their military was taking their time leaving. The central government could do nothing to make them leave, and none of the states really had any power to make them leave as well. Number 4, again, it was so difficult to change the law. For example, in 1786, Virginia actually proposed a way to regulate trade, but it was never adopted because a few states didn't agree to it. Number 5, it was also really hard whenever there were disputes over territory. There was not a system in place to actually figure out how to settle these disputes. For example, Connecticut and Pennsylvania both claimed the Wyoming Valley, and because the dispute could not be settled, it led to the Pennamite-Yankee War. The United States also had difficulties maintaining good relations with other countries. In 1786, for the benefit of the states, John Adams tried to negotiate a trade agreement with the British because up to that point, the British was our major and only trading partner. But the British refused to even listen to him because they didn't really take the United States seriously, and a lot of the states were kind of hesitant to enter into any trade agreements with them. And finally, under the Articles of Confederation, the government could not pay back their war debts. So they racked up a lot of debts during the war, and after the war, they had no way to raise money. They couldn't tax people. They had to rely on the voluntary contributions of the other states. While some states did contribute, there were others who didn't or who couldn't. And so this led to a financial crisis. So, because of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, it became clear that a new system of government was needed for the United States to function more effectively. So, in 1787, a group of delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies, yes, that's right, Rhode Island did not attend, gathered in Philadelphia for a constitutional convention where they would write a new document that would create a new, strong central government for the United States. And that is where we will pick up next time. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. Please make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't yet.